The first rays of sunlight crept through the massive windows of the Harrington mansion as Eliza wiped the sweat from her forehead. She had been polishing the same marble countertop for 15 minutes, lost in thought about the pile of bills waiting at her small apartment. At 28, this wasn't where she had imagined her life would be. "Make sure you get the fingerprints off the piano today," Mrs. Harrington said as she breezed through the kitchen in her workout clothes, not bothering to look at Eliza. "We're having guests this weekend." "Yes, ma'am," Eliza replied, though Mrs. Harrington had already disappeared down the hallway. The Harrington family barely noticed Eliza most days. She had worked as their housekeeper for 3 years, becoming as invisible as the expensive furniture she dusted. The mansion had 32 rooms, and Eliza knew every corner of each one. She knew which floorboards creaked, which windows let in drafts during winter, and which rooms the family rarely entered. Her favorite was the music room. The room housed a magnificent Steinway concert grand piano that gleamed under the skylight. Mr. Harrington had bought it for his wife's birthday 2 years ago, even though she didn't play. "It completes the room," Mrs. Harrington had told her friends at the unveiling party. Eliza had served drinks that night, watching as guests ran their fingers carelessly over the keys before returning to their champagne. That piano cost more than what Eliza would earn in 10 years. Later that afternoon, Eliza pushed her cleaning cart into the music room. The space smelled of lemon polish and old books. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching dust particles that danced in the air. She ran a cloth over the piano's shiny surface, careful not to leave streaks or fingerprints. When she finished, she stood back to admire her work. The house was empty. The Harringtons were at their country club and the other staff had gone for the day. The silence pressed against her ears. Eliza glanced at the doorway, then back at the piano. Her heart beat faster. Just once, she thought. Just for a moment. She set down her cleaning cloth and slowly lifted the fallboard. The ivory keys seemed to glow, inviting her fingers to touch them. With a deep breath, she sat on the bench, her back automatically straightening the way her old teacher had taught her. What the Harringtons didn't know, what no one in her current life knew, was that Eliza had once been destined for a different future. For 12 years, she had studied piano at a prestigious music school, earning scholarships and turning heads at recitals. Her teachers had spoken of international competitions and conservatory placements. Then her father got sick. The medical bills piled up. Her mother took a second job. Eliza left school to care for her siblings and took whatever work she could find. The dreams of concert halls faded, replaced by the reality of survival, but her hands remembered. She began softly with a simple Bach prelude. Her fingers found the keys as if returning home after a long journey. The notes filled the empty room, hesitant at first, then growing in confidence. When she finished the piece, she sat in silence for a moment, feeling something inside her stir back to life. She looked at her watch. The family wouldn't return for hours. Her hands moved to Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. As she played, Eliza closed her eyes. She wasn't in the Harrington mansion anymore. She was on stage under soft lights with an audience holding their breath. The music poured out of her, flowing from some deep place that her daily life couldn't touch. The sound was rich and full, filling the high-ceilinged room with emotion that had no other outlet. In these stolen moments, she remembered who she had been before life took a different turn, before she became invisible. When the last note faded, Eliza kept her eyes closed, savoring the feeling. Then she carefully closed the fallboard and returned to her cleaning cart. This became her secret ritual. Each evening, when the house emptied, she would allow herself 10 minutes at the piano. Just 10 minutes to remember, to feel something beyond the dull ache of dreams deferred. 10 minutes to be herself again. As weeks passed, she grew bolder. 10 minutes became 20, then 30. Her repertoire expanded as muscle memory returned. Debussy's Clair de Lune, Mozart's sonatas. She even attempted pieces she had never mastered before, challenging herself as her old teachers had. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, Eliza sat at the piano after finishing the day's work. Lightning occasionally illuminated the room, followed by the low rumble of thunder. The storm had driven the Harringtons to cancel their dinner plans, but they were upstairs, unlikely to come down before morning. Still, she played quietly, choosing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Its haunting first movement suited the stormy night and her melancholy mood. Her father's health had taken a turn for the worse, and the hospital had called about payment plans again. She poured her worry into the music, letting it speak what she couldn't say aloud. As the piece progressed, Eliza forgot to be cautious. Her playing grew more intense, matching the storm outside. The music swelled and receded like waves, carrying her away from her troubles. She didn't hear the footsteps on the stairs or notice when the door creaked open wider. Mr. Harrington stood in the doorway, glass of whiskey in hand, watching his maid transform at the keyboard. His expression shifted from surprise to confusion to something harder to name. He had come downstairs for a book to help him sleep, not expecting to find world-class piano playing in his music room. Richard Harrington had built his real estate empire through ruthless business sense and an ability to spot opportunity. As he listened to Eliza really play, with technical skill that even his untrained ear could recognize as exceptional, the wheels in his mind began to turn. The Harrington Foundation's annual charity gala was in 3 weeks. The event drew the city's wealthiest and most influential people, and Richard prided himself on making each year more memorable than the last. His wife had been panicking because their usual pianist had canceled due to a scheduling conflict, and here was the solution. Polishing his piano keys with a virtuoso's touch, Eliza reached the end of the movement and sat in silence, hands resting in her lap. That's when she heard the slow clapping from the doorway. She jumped to her feet, nearly knocking over the piano bench. "Mr. Harrington, I'm so sorry, I was just—" He raised a hand to silence her. "How long have you been playing my piano without permission, Eliza?" Her face burned with shame. "I'm sorry, sir. It won't happen again. You didn't answer my question." She looked at the floor. "A few months, sir. Only after finishing my work. I never left any marks on it." Richard swirled the whiskey in his glass, studying her with cold calculation. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "I studied at the city conservatory. Before I had to leave school. And now you clean houses." It wasn't a question, but Eliza answered anyway. "Yes, sir." Richard took a sip of his drink, then set it down on a side table. "The foundation gala is in 3 weeks. Our pianist canceled." He paused, watching her reaction. "I think we've found his replacement." Eliza's head snapped up. "Sir, you'll play at the gala. 3 pieces, 15 minutes total." His voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. "Patricia will get you the details. You'll need appropriate attire, of course." Eliza's mind raced. Was she being fired? Given a chance? She couldn't tell from his expression. "Mr. Harrington, I don't understand." "It's simple," he said, picking up his drink again. "You used my property without permission. Now you'll make it up to me by performing at my event. Unless you'd prefer I find someone else for both roles, pianist and housekeeper." The threat was clear. "Play or lose her job, I'll do it," she said quietly. He nodded once, satisfied. "Good, and Eliza? Don't mention our arrangement to anyone. As far as the staff knows, I discovered your talent through normal channels and am generously providing you an opportunity." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's a better story, don't you think?" After he left, Eliza sank back onto the piano bench, her hands trembling. What had just happened? A chance to play again, to really play for an audience, should have filled her with joy. Instead, dread pooled in her stomach. Richard Harrington hadn't offered her an opportunity. He had found another way to own her talent, just as he owned the piano she played it on. The rain continued to beat against the windows as Eliza sat motionless, wondering what would happen when the wealthy man's invisible maid suddenly became visible to his entire social circle. Somehow she didn't think his better story would be the one that got told. Eliza's hand shook as she scrubbed the kitchen counter the next morning. She had barely slept, replaying Mr. Harrington's words in her mind. Play at the gala or lose her job. It wasn't really a choice. "You're wearing out that spot," said Miguel the gardener as he came in for his morning coffee. His weathered face creased with concern. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Eliza forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just tired." She couldn't tell him about the piano, about Mr. Harrington's offer. The other staff members knew nothing about her past. To them, she was just Eliza who cleaned the house and occasionally shared homemade cookies in the small staff kitchen. Not Eliza who had once played at Carnegie Hall in a youth showcase. Not Eliza who had dreamed of Juilliard. "Ms. Eliza?" Patricia, Mr. Harrington's personal assistant, appeared in the doorway. Her crisp pantsuit and severe bun made Eliza feel even more aware of her own simple uniform and messy ponytail. Mr. Harrington would like to see you in his office now. Miguel raised his eyebrows but said nothing as Eliza wiped her hands on her apron and followed Patricia through the mansion. They walked past rooms Eliza had cleaned countless times, up to the wing where the family conducted their business affairs, a part of the house where she usually only went to empty trash bins and vacuum. Patricia knocked on a heavy wooden door, then opened it without waiting for a response. "The housekeeper, sir," she announced, then stepped aside. Mr. Harrington sat behind a massive desk, phone pressed to his ear. He held up one finger without looking at Eliza, signaling her to wait. She stood awkwardly just inside the doorway, hands clasped in front of her. "Absolutely, we'll double the donation this year," he was saying, voice smooth as butter. "The Harrington Foundation is committed to arts education for underprivileged youth." He laughed at something the other person said. "Yes, we're actually featuring an incredible discovery at this year's gala. A genuine diamond in the rough." His eyes flicked to Eliza, and she realized with a sinking feeling that he was talking about her. "I'll have Patricia send you the details. Looking forward to seeing you there." He hung up and finally addressed her. "Sit down." Eliza perched on the edge of a leather chair, feeling out of place in her work clothes. "3 weeks until the gala," he said without preamble. "What can you play that will impress my guests?" She swallowed hard. I would need to practice first. It's been years since I performed. You sounded performance-ready last night. Don't waste my time with false modesty." "I could play Chopin," she offered, "his Ballad No. 1 in G minor, and perhaps Debussy's Clair de Lune. People always respond to that one." Mr. Harrington leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Too predictable. I want something that will make people talk, something virtuosic. Liszt's La Campanella." The piece was notoriously difficult, a test of technical skill that had always challenged her. "Or I could prepare Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the first movement." That seemed to interest him. "The Rachmaninoff, ambitious, can you handle it?" The question stung her pride. "Yes," she said more firmly than she intended. "I can handle it." He studied her for a long moment as if seeing her clearly for the first time. 3 pieces. The Rachmaninoff, the Liszt, and end with something emotional. Your choice. "I'll need time to practice," she said. "The Steinway is different from what I'm used to, and those pieces require. You can use the piano after your work is done. And on Sundays when we're at our lake house." He picked up his phone, already dismissing her. "Patricia will handle the rest." As if on cue, the door opened and Patricia entered with a tablet in hand. "We'll need her measurements," Mr. Harrington said to his assistant. "And schedule a hair appointment the day before." Patricia nodded, making notes. "The usual stylist?" "No, someone who can make her presentable but not too." He waved his hand vaguely. "You understand, they discussed her as if she wasn't there." Eliza's cheeks burned, but she kept her expression neutral, a skill learned from years of working for people who looked through her rather than at her. "You can go," Mr. Harrington said finally, still not looking at her. "Patricia will find you later for measurements." Eliza rose and left the office, legs unsteady. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. What had she gotten herself into? For the rest of the day, she moved through her tasks mechanically, mind elsewhere. As she dusted bookshelves in the library, she mentally ran through the fingerings for La Campanella. While scrubbing shower tiles, she heard the dramatic opening chords of the Rachmaninoff in her head. After dinner, when the family retreated to their private rooms, Eliza slipped into the music room. This time she didn't have to be secretive. Mr. Harrington had given permission, had ordered her to practice. She sat at the piano, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. The first few attempts were rough. Her fingers, strong from years of cleaning but out of practice with the demanding pieces, fumbled over difficult passages. But muscle memory gradually returned, and with it, her confidence. She played until her back ached and her fingertips grew sore. When she finally stopped, she realized someone was watching. Mrs. Harrington stood in the doorway in her silk robe, a glass of wine in her hand. "So it's true," she said, entering the room. "Richard said he'd discovered a prodigy among the help, but I thought he was exaggerating." Eliza stood quickly. "I'm sorry if I disturbed you, ma'am." Mrs. Harrington waved away her apology and moved closer to the piano. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "I studied at the conservatory before I had to leave. And now you're going to perform at our gala." It wasn't a question. Mrs. Harrington took a sip of her wine, studying Eliza over the rim of her glass. My husband always did have an eye for the unusual. It will certainly give people something to talk about. She ran a manicured finger along the piano's shiny surface. Do you know why we host this gala every year? Eliza shook her head. Tax benefits primarily, and social currency. The people who attend don't care about underprivileged children learning music. They care about being seen caring. She gave a small, bitter laugh. Just like they won't care about your playing. They'll care about the novelty of it. The maid with hidden talents. The charity case. Eliza felt her chest tighten. Is that how Mr. Harrington sees this? As a novelty act. Mrs. Harrington's smile didn't reach her eyes. Richard sees everything as an opportunity for publicity. The foundation, the gala, you. She moved toward the door, then paused. You play beautifully, but remember your place in this house. After the gala, you'll still be the help. After she left, Eliza sat motionless at the piano. The excitement she had felt while playing had evaporated, replaced by a hollow feeling. She wasn't being given an opportunity to showcase her talent. She was being put on display, like an exotic animal in a zoo. For the next 2 weeks, Eliza divided her time between her regular duties and practice. She woke at dawn to play before the family rose and stayed late into the evening after they retired. Her hands cramped and her back protested. But the music began to flow more naturally with each passing day. Patricia arranged for a dress fitting in a small room off the kitchen, making it clear that Eliza shouldn't be seen entering the main part of the house through the front door. The seamstress took measurements without meeting her eyes, as if talent might be contagious. 3 days before the gala, a package arrived for Eliza. Inside was her performance outfit, not a concert dress as she had expected, but a stylized version of a maid's uniform. It was black with white trim, elevated with subtle beading but unmistakable in its message. Mr. Harrington thought it would be more authentic, Patricia explained, not quite meeting Eliza's gaze. He wants to emphasize your journey. That night, Eliza practiced with a new intensity, channeling her humiliation into the music. If they wanted a show, she would give them one, but not the kind they expected. The day before the gala, Eliza was called away from her cleaning duties to attend a final meeting about the event. She entered the family's sunroom to find Mr. Harrington speaking with a videographer. We'll want close-ups during the emotional moments, he was saying. Really capture the contrast between her background and her talent. He noticed Eliza and gestured for her to join them. There she is, our diamond in the rough. He turned to her with a publicity-ready smile. All set for tomorrow? We've had an overwhelming response since I sent out the press release. Even the local news might cover it. Press release? Eliza asked faintly. From mop to maestro, he quoted proudly. The Harrington Foundation discovers untapped talent within its own walls. He checked his watch. The hairstylist is waiting for you downstairs. Nothing too fancy. We want to maintain the authentic feel. As Eliza turned to leave, he added, Oh, and we've arranged for your father to attend. Thought it would make a nice human interest angle. She froze. You contacted my father? Patricia found him through your employment records. He's quite ill, I understand. We're sending a car for him. His voice softened with practiced sympathy. We thought it would mean a lot to him to see his daughter perform. Eliza couldn't speak. They had invaded her privacy, manipulated her family, all for a human interest angle. But the thought of her father hearing her play again after all these years. Thank you, she managed, though the words tasted bitter. That night, as Eliza ran through her pieces one final time, she made a decision. They could dress her like a servant, put her on display, and use her story for publicity. But when she played tomorrow, she would reclaim something they couldn't take from her. Her dignity. She would play not for their amusement or their social media posts, but for herself and for her father. The music would speak what she could not say. The night of the gala arrived with a spring thunderstorm. Rain lashed against the windows of the Harrington mansion as workers transformed the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over white-clothed tables adorned with elaborate flower arrangements. Champagne towers sparkled near a small stage where the Steinway had been positioned, polished to perfection by Eliza that morning. She watched the preparations from the shadows of the service corridor, still in her regular uniform. In 2 hours, she would sit at that piano in front of the city's elite. wearing a maid's costume designed to emphasize the very position these people rarely noticed. There you are. Patricia appeared beside her, clipboard in hand. You need to get ready. The hair and makeup team is waiting in the guest suite. Eliza followed her through the back hallways designed to keep service staff invisible to guests. They entered a room Eliza usually cleaned but had never used. It felt strange to sit on furniture she normally dusted. Two stylists waited, eyeing her critically. This is her? One asked Patricia, as if Eliza couldn't hear. Yes. Mr. Harrington wants her presentable, but not too. Patricia made the same vague gesture Mr. Harrington had used in his office. Got it? The stylist nodded. Natural but improved. Still recognizable as the help. They worked on her for an hour, discussing her as if she were a mannequin. The hairstylist pulled her dark hair into a neat bun, something that won't distract from the playing, while the makeup artist applied what she called minimal enhancements. When they finished, Patricia handed Eliza the modified maid's uniform on a hanger. Change quickly. We need to review the program before guests arrive. Alone, Eliza slipped into the outfit. The material was finer than her work uniform, but the styling was unmistakable. Black with white accents, fitted to suggest servitude with a touch of elegance. She stared at her reflection, barely recognizing herself with the polished hair and subtle makeup. Was this how they saw her? A curiosity to be cleaned up just enough to be presentable? Patricia returned and led her to a small waiting room near the ballroom. You'll stay here until it's time. There's water on the table. She handed Eliza a printed program. You're on after Mr. Harrington's speech around 9 o'clock. Eliza glanced at the program. There she was, listed between the welcome address and the dinner service. Special musical interlude. Eliza Morales, Harrington household staff. Has my father arrived? She asked. Patricia checked her phone. The car picked him up half an hour ago. He'll be seated near the front. After Patricia left, Eliza paced the small room. Through the walls, she could hear the ballroom filling with voices. Bright laughter, the clink of glasses, the murmur of wealthy people in their natural habitat. Occasionally, staff members hurried past her door, carrying trays or rushing to fix last-minute problems. None of them looked in. At precisely 8:30, the doors to the ballroom closed and Mr. Harrington's amplified voice welcomed his guests. Eliza pressed her ear to the door, listening. Delighted to announce that the Harrington Foundation has surpassed last year's fundraising goal by 20%, he was saying to polite applause. Arts education is the cornerstone of a civilized society, which is why we're committed to bringing music to underprivileged communities. More applause, followed by a joke that earned practiced laughter. Tonight we have something truly special, a living example of the talent that exists in unexpected places, waiting to be discovered. His voice took on a theatrical quality. 3 weeks ago, I made an extraordinary discovery within my own home. Eliza's stomach clenched as he told a romanticized version of finding her playing the piano, omitting the part where he had threatened her job, making it sound as if he had been struck by inspiration to showcase her gift. And so tonight, as a testament to the Harrington Foundation's mission of finding and nurturing hidden talent, I present to you a true diamond in the rough. Please welcome Eliza Morales, who normally keeps our home spotless, but tonight will show you another kind of brilliance. The applause was tentative, uncertain. Eliza heard whispers. The maid? Is this a joke? How charitable. The door opened and Patricia beckoned her forward. You're on. Eliza's legs felt wooden as she walked the short distance to the ballroom entrance. The crowd turned to watch her. 200 faces all staring with expressions ranging from curiosity to amusement to discomfort. She kept her eyes forward, focusing on the piano that waited for her. As she crossed the room, she scanned the tables for her father. There, seated at a front table, looking frail but alert in his best suit, the one he had worn to her recitals years ago. Their eyes met and he gave her a small nod of encouragement. She reached the piano and stood for a moment facing the audience. She was supposed to curtsy or bow. Patricia had rehearsed this with her, but instead she simply sat down. She would not perform gratitude for the chance to be exploited. The room fell silent as she positioned her hands over the keys. Eliza closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The opening of Liszt's La Campanella filled the room. Light, bell-like notes that quickly gave way to technical passages of stunning difficulty. Her fingers flew across the keys with practiced precision, each note crystal clear despite the blistering tempo. She felt rather than saw the shift in the audience. The murmuring stopped. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Those who had been scrolling on phones under the table looked up. This was not what they had expected, not a novelty act or a cute party trick, but virtuoso playing that commanded attention. As she moved through the piece, building to its thunderous climax, Eliza forgot about the costume, forgot about Mr. Harrington's exploitation, forgot about everything except the music. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm, her face transformed by concentration and passion. When the final notes of La Campanella echoed through the ballroom, there was a moment of stunned silence before applause erupted. Real applause, not the polite kind they had given Mr. Harrington's speech. People rose to their feet, expressions of genuine surprise and appreciation replacing the earlier skepticism. Without acknowledging the applause, Eliza moved directly into her second piece. The dramatic opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 silenced the crowd once more. This was not the shortened version Mr. Harrington had expected. Eliza played the entire first movement, losing herself in its sweeping emotion. Through half-closed eyes, she could see her father in the front row, tears streaming down his face. For him, she poured everything into the music, all the dreams they had shared, all the sacrifices they had made, all the pride he had felt watching her play before illness and poverty had interrupted their plans. By the time she finished the Rachmaninoff, the audience was completely hers. Even those who knew little about classical music could feel the emotion in her playing. Several people were openly weeping. At one table, a famous composer leaned forward, watching her hands with intense interest. Only Mr. Harrington remained stone-faced, standing at the side of the room with arms crossed. This was not the quaint performance he had planned, not the heartwarming story of the maid who could play a little piano. This was an artist commanding a room full of people who had come to see a circus act. For her final piece, Eliza had chosen Chopin's Revolutionary Etude, a piece born of political turmoil and defiance. Her hands attacked the keys with controlled fury, every note a declaration. This was not just music. It was a statement. She played for every person who had ever been overlooked, underestimated, or used. She played for her father, who had worked 2 jobs to pay for her lessons. She played for Miguel and the other staff members who lived in the shadows of wealth. And she played for herself, for the dreams she had set aside but never abandoned. As the final chords resounded through the ballroom, Eliza kept her head bowed, breathing hard from the emotional and physical exertion. When she finally looked up, the entire room was on its feet. The applause was deafening, genuine, thunderous appreciation that continued as she rose from the bench. Several people wiped tears from their eyes. At the composer's table, people were whispering urgently to each other, pointing at her. Her father was smiling through his tears, his thin hands clapping with what little strength he had left. Only then did Eliza allow herself a small smile, not for the crowd, but for him. Mr. Harrington stepped forward, his publicity smile firmly in place, and took her arm as if to claim some credit for her performance. "Ladies and gentlemen, Eliza Morales." "What did I tell you? A true discovery." As cameras flashed, he leaned close to her ear. "That wasn't what we rehearsed," he hissed. "You were supposed to keep it light and accessible, but it was too late." The crowd pressed forward, ignoring him to reach her. A silver-haired woman in diamonds took her hand. "My dear, where did you study? Your technique is extraordinary." "The conservatory," Eliza answered simply. "Before I had to leave." "Had to leave?" The woman looked genuinely puzzled, as if the concept of financial hardship was foreign to her. Before Eliza could respond, others pushed forward with questions and praise. She caught fragments of conversations around her. They're wasting her talent cleaning houses, and someone should sponsor her better than the pianist at Carnegie last month. The composer made his way to her side. "That was not the playing of an amateur," he said quietly. "Why are you working as a maid?" The question hung in the air as Mr. Harrington tried to steer the conversation back to the foundation. But the damage, or perhaps the miracle, was done. The carefully constructed narrative had collapsed under the weight of undeniable talent. Across the room, Eliza caught her father's eye again. He nodded once more, but this time with a different message. They could dress her like a servant, but when she played, she was free. She straightened her shoulders and turned to face the crowd, ready to answer their questions with the truth, not the sanitized version in Mr. Harrington's press release, but her own story told in her own voice, just as her music had been. Eliza woke at her usual 5:30 a.m. the morning after the gala. For a moment, she lay in her small apartment bedroom, wondering if the previous night had been a dream. Her fingers were still sore from playing, and the stylized maid's uniform hung on her closet door, physical proof that it had all happened. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It had been buzzing all night, but she had been too exhausted to check it after bringing her father home from the gala. Now she picked it up and nearly dropped it in shock. Hundreds of notifications, messages from old conservatory friends, comments on social media accounts she barely used, and, most surprisingly, emails from people she didn't know, a music critic, 2 talent agents, and the director of her former school. She scrolled through them in disbelief. Someone had recorded her performance and posted it online. The video had already been viewed thousands of times. Piano Maid stuns wealthy. Crowd read one headline, Hidden Virtuoso Shames. Elite, proclaimed another. She clicked on the video with trembling fingers. There she was in that ridiculous uniform, seated at the Steinway. The camera had caught the moment when she'd shifted from reluctant performer to defiant artist. Comments beneath the video ranged from outrage at her, exploitation to awe at her playing, disgusting. How they dressed her up like a servant for their amusement, wrote one viewer. This is what real talent looks like, said another. Who is she? Why isn't she on the concert stage? Asked many more. Eliza closed the app, overwhelmed. Today was Monday, a work day. She needed to be at the Harrington house by 7 a.m. Video or no video. Mr. Harrington would expect his breakfast room spotless. As always, she dressed in her regular uniform, ate a quick breakfast, and headed to the bus stop. On the ride, she couldn't help checking her phone again. The view count had doubled. People were sharing the video with angry captions about exploitation of workers and tone-deaf rich people. Others focused solely on her talent, demanding to know why someone who played like that was cleaning houses for a living. As she approached the Harrington estate, Eliza was surprised to see several news vans parked outside the gate. A reporter spotted her and hurried over. Excuse me, are you Eliza Morales, the pianist from last night's video? Eliza froze. How had they found her so quickly? We'd love a statement about your performance and the unusual circumstances, the reporter continued, microphone extended. I'm sorry, I have to get to work, Eliza said, ducking past and hurrying through the service entrance. Inside, she found the staff in an uproar. There you are, Miguel exclaimed when he saw her. Everyone's talking about you. Why didn't you tell us you could play like that? The cook, Mrs. Chen, rushed over to hug her. My nephew showed me the video this morning. You were amazing. Eliza blushed. It wasn't supposed to be recorded. Well, it's everywhere now, said Miguel. And the phones haven't stopped ringing. As if on cue, Patricia appeared, looking frazzled for the first time since Eliza had known her. There you are. Mr. Harrington wants to see you immediately. His office. Eliza followed her through the house, noticing how the other staff members stopped to stare and whisper as she passed. The mood in the mansion was electric, as if a storm was brewing indoors. Mr. Harrington was on the phone when she entered his office, pacing behind his desk. His face was flushed with anger. I don't care about the optics, he was saying. It was a private event. We'll issue a takedown notice for the video. He looked up, saw Eliza, and abruptly ended his call. Do you have any idea what's happening? He demanded. Before she could respond, he turned his laptop around to show her the screen. It displayed a social media post with the video of her performance overlaid with text. Millionaire forces Maid to perform in uniform for rich friends. Her response? Musical brilliance that puts them to shame. This is a PR nightmare, he said. We've got journalists calling about exploitation and class discrimination. The foundation's largest donor just pulled their annual commitment. Eliza stood silently, hands clasped in front of her. Say something. He snapped. I'm sorry the video upset you, she said carefully. I had no idea someone was recording. That's all? You're sorry? This makes me look like some kind of a villain. Eliza met his gaze steadily. You made me wear a maid's uniform to perform classical masterpieces for your amusement. You threatened my job if I didn't comply. What would you call that? His face reddened further. I gave you an opportunity. Before me, you were nothing, just another housekeeper. I put you on stage. No, Eliza said quietly. I was a trained musician before I ever worked here. You didn't discover me. You exploited me. Mr. Harrington slammed his hand on the desk. You're fired. Pack your things and be out by noon. She had expected this, but the words still stung. Yes, sir. As she turned to leave, he added, and don't expect a reference. Back in the staff area, Eliza found her co-workers waiting anxiously. When she told them she'd been fired, Mrs. Chen wrapped an arm around her shoulders. It's his loss, she said firmly. We all saw the video. You don't belong here anyway. You belong on a proper stage. Eliza packed her few personal items from the staff locker room. As she prepared to leave, Patricia appeared again. Mrs. Harrington would like to see you before you go, she said, not quite meeting Eliza's eyes. In the music room. Surprised, Eliza made her way there. Mrs. Harrington stood by the Steinway, gazing out the window at the reporters still gathered at the gate. She turned when Eliza entered. So my husband fired you, she said without preamble. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Harrington nodded as if this confirmed something. He was never good at handling situations that didn't go according to his script. She approached Eliza, studying her face. You know, I was a musician once. Not like you, I had moderate talent and excellent teachers. But I understood what it meant to love music. She ran her fingers lightly over the piano keys. I gave it up when I married Richard. It seemed a fair trade at the time. Comfort and security in exchange for a passion I was never quite good enough to pursue professionally. Eliza wasn't sure how to respond. In 3 years, this was the most personal conversation she'd ever had with her employer. When I heard you play that first night, Mrs. Harrington continued, I was jealous. Not of your position, God knows I wouldn't trade places with you, but of your gift. The way you lose yourself in the music. She sighed, and then Richard turned it into another one of his publicity stunts. She reached into her pocket and withdrew an envelope. This is for you. 3 months' salary plus a bonus. It isn't charity, she added quickly, seeing Eliza's hesitation. Consider it compensation for what my husband put you through. Eliza accepted the envelope. Thank you, Mrs. Harrington. There's something else. Mrs. Harrington handed her a business card. My brother teaches at the conservatory. I took the liberty of sending him the video this morning. He'd like to meet with you. Eliza stared at the card, then back at Mrs. Harrington. I don't understand. Sometimes talent finds a way, she said simply, even when we try to bury it under practical concerns. As Eliza left the Harrington estate for the last time, she felt strangely light. The reporters called out to her, but she slipped past them and headed toward the bus stop. She needed time to process everything that had happened. Her phone rang. It was her father. Have you seen the news? He asked without greeting. His voice sounded stronger than it had in months. Your video's everywhere. People are asking who taught you, where you studied. I got fired, she told him. There was a brief pause. Good, he said finally. That place was never worthy of you. She laughed despite herself. Dad, I need a job. We have bills, your treatments. We'll figure it out, he interrupted. We always do. But first you have a message from Dr. Winters, your old teacher. He's been trying to reach you. By the time Eliza reached her apartment, she had received 7 more calls from former teachers, from a music journalist wanting to tell her story, and most surprisingly, from the famous composer who had been at the gala. I'd like to discuss a possible commission, his message said. Your interpretation of Chopin was illuminating. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Eliza sat on her small sofa, trying to make sense of it all. 24 hours ago, she had been dreading a humiliating performance. Now, doors that had been closed for years were suddenly opening again. Her phone pinged with a text from Miguel. Check your email. Someone from the foundation leaked something you should see. She opened her email to find a forwarded message with an attachment. It was an internal memo from Mr. Harrington to the foundation board, dated 2 weeks earlier. The piano maid angle has excellent human interest potential. We'll emphasize her disadvantaged background and limited opportunities, positioning the foundation as her path to recognition. The novelty of a servant with surprising talent should generate significant press coverage, especially with her in uniform. This narrative aligns perfectly with our mission statement, while distracting from the recent labor violation allegations. Eliza's hands shook as she read the rest. It laid out in clinical terms exactly how Mr. Harrington had planned to use her story. not just as entertainment, but as deliberate misdirection from a brewing scandal about worker conditions at his development projects. She forwarded the email to her own personal account, then sat in silence for a long moment. The irony wasn't lost on her. Mr. Harrington had planned to use her music to drown out voices crying exploitation, but instead, her playing had amplified those very concerns. Her phone rang again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. "Is this Eliza Morales?" asked a woman's voice when she answered. "I'm Diane Powell from Channel 8 News. We'd like to interview you about your performance and the circumstances surrounding it. We've seen the internal memo from the Harrington Foundation." Eliza took a deep breath. For years she had lived in the background, making herself invisible to the wealthy people she served. She had set aside her own voice to survive. But now people were listening, not just to her music but to her story. "Yes," she said finally. "I'll do the interview." It's time people heard the truth. As she hung up, she glanced at the piano in the corner of her living room. A humble upright, nothing like the Harrington's Steinway, but hers. She sat down and played a few notes, feeling the familiar joy rise within her. Whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain: she would never again be silent. 1 year later, Eliza stood backstage at the city's grand concert hall, eyes closed as she listened to the orchestra warming up. The familiar flutter of nerves tickled her stomach, but it was a good feeling, the kind that sharpened her senses rather than dulling them. 5 minutes. "Ms. Morales," the stage manager said as she passed. Eliza nodded and smoothed the midnight blue gown that sparkled subtly under the lights. Her father had helped choose it during one of his better days. "You should look like yourself," he had said, "not how anyone else expects a pianist to look." So much had changed in a year. Sometimes she still found it hard to believe that the viral video of her performance had been the catalyst for her current life. The months following that night had been a whirlwind of interviews, offers, and difficult decisions. The Channel 8 interview had aired 3 days after she left the Harrington estate. Sitting across from the reporter, Eliza had told her story simply and without embellishment. Her early training, her father's illness, the financial pressures that had forced her to abandon music, and finally, Mr. Harrington's opportunity that came with a maid's uniform. When asked if she felt angry, she had answered truthfully, "I was angry at first, but then I realized that without that moment of humiliation, I might never have found my way back to music." Sometimes we need to be stripped of our dignity to remember what truly matters. The leaked memo had caused a far bigger scandal than her performance. Labor rights activists had seized upon it as evidence of the Harrington Foundation's hypocrisy. Former employees came forward with their own stories of exploitation. Major donors withdrew support. The foundation's board called an emergency meeting and voted to replace Mr. Harrington as chairman. Eliza had watched these developments from a distance, already moving in a different direction. Dr. Winters, her former teacher, had arranged for her to play for the conservatory's scholarship committee. They had offered her a special 1-year program to update her skills and credentials. "You haven't lost your technique," Dr. Winters had told her after hearing her play, "but you need time to rebuild your repertoire and professional connections." The famous composer from the gala had indeed commissioned a piece from her, a short piano work inspired by her experience. Titling it Servant's Sonata, she had woven themes of restraint and liberation throughout the composition. When she premiered it at a small recital 6 months ago, critics had praised its raw emotional authenticity and technical sophistication. Now she was about to make her debut with the symphony orchestra, playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the same piece she had performed at the Harrington Gala, but this time on her own terms, wearing her own clothes, in front of an audience who had come specifically to hear her play. 2 minutes, the stage manager called. Eliza opened her eyes and took a deep breath. In the front row tonight sat her father, his health improved thanks to a new treatment they could now afford. Beside him would be Mrs. Chen and Miguel, who had both quit the Harrington household soon after she left. Miguel was studying music therapy now, inspired by her story. Mrs. Chen had started her own catering business. The Harrington mansion had been sold 3 months ago. The last Eliza had heard, Mr. Harrington had moved to another state. His reputation and business in tatters after investigations revealed financial improprieties beyond the labor violations. Mrs. Harrington had filed for divorce and reclaimed her family name. She had reached out to Eliza once, sending a simple note of congratulations when the symphony announced Eliza's debut. "Places, please." Eliza moved to the stage entrance. The conductor caught her eye and smiled encouragingly. The concertmaster finished tuning the orchestra, and a hush fell over the musicians. As the stage door opened, Eliza felt a moment of déjà vu. Once again, she was about to walk onto a stage and sit at a piano in front of strangers. But everything else was different. This time she walked out as herself, not a curiosity or a novelty, but an artist returning to her rightful place. The audience applauded as she crossed to the grand piano. She took a moment to adjust the bench, then nodded to the conductor that she was ready. As the orchestra began the dark, swirling introduction to the concerto, Eliza let the music wash over her, counting the measures until her entrance. When her hands touched the keys, all thoughts of the past year faded. There was only the music, the same notes she had played in that stylized maid's uniform, but now free from any context except their own beauty. The first movement flowed through her with a passion that had only deepened since the gala performance. Where before she had played with defiance, now she played with confidence. The second movement allowed her to show a more vulnerable side, a tender lyricism that spoke of healing and hope. And the third movement burned with joyful energy, a celebration of obstacles overcome. When the final chords resounded through the concert hall, the audience erupted in a standing ovation. Flowers were brought to the stage. The conductor shook her hand with genuine respect. Eliza bowed, smiling through happy tears as she searched the front row for her father's face. He stood with the aid of a cane, clapping proudly. After 3 curtain calls, Eliza finally left the stage, still buzzing with adrenaline and emotion. In her dressing room, a mountain of flowers awaited her, along with cards and small gifts from well-wishers. Her phone was already filling with congratulatory messages. A knock came at the door. "Ms. Morales, there are some people here to see you." She opened the door to find her father supported by Miguel with Mrs. Chen beside them. "You are magnificent," her father said, embracing her. "Even better than I remember from when you were younger." "That's because I'm playing for myself now," she replied. "Not for judges or teachers or anyone else." They were joined by Dr. Winters and several former classmates who had come to support her. The dressing room filled with laughter and conversation as Eliza accepted their congratulations. Later, as the crowd thinned, a young girl appeared at the door clutching a program. "Excuse me," she said shyly. "Would you sign this? I'm learning piano and my mom brought me to see you tonight." Eliza smiled and took the program. "What's your name?" "Lucia." "I've been playing for 3 years. Do you love it?" Eliza asked, pen poised above the page. Lucia nodded enthusiastically. "Sometimes my fingers get tired, but I don't want to stop. The music feels like it comes from inside me, not just from the piano." "That's exactly right," Eliza said, writing a personal note before signing her name. "Never forget that feeling." As Lucia left, clutching the signed program to her chest, Eliza's phone rang. It was her agent with news about another opportunity, a recording contract with a respected classical label. "They're offering a 2-album deal," he explained. "The first would be standard repertoire, but for the second, they want original compositions." They were very impressed by Servant's Sonata. After the call, Eliza sat quietly for a moment, taking in how completely her life had transformed. From cleaning other people's houses to receiving recording offers, all because someone had tried to shame her and failed. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find an elegantly dressed woman holding a small package. "Mrs. Harrington," Eliza said, surprised. "I didn't know you were here tonight." "Elizabeth, please," the woman corrected gently. "I'm not a Harrington anymore." She handed Eliza the package. "I wanted to give you this. It belonged to my grandmother." Eliza unwrapped the gift to find an antique metronome, beautifully crafted in dark wood with gold accents. "She used it throughout her career," Elizabeth explained. "I think she would want you to have it." "Thank you," Eliza said sincerely. "Would you like to come in?" They sat together awkwardly at first, 2 women from different worlds connected by music and shared history. "I heard the mansion was sold," Eliza said finally. Elizabeth nodded. "It's being converted into a community arts center." Anonymous donation. A small smile played at her lips. That's fitting, Eliza replied, understanding what wasn't being said. I'm sorry for my part in what happened, Elizabeth said. I saw what Richard was doing and I didn't stop it. You helped me afterward, Eliza reminded her. That counted for something. They talked for a while longer, not as former employer and employee, but as two women finding unexpected common ground. When Elizabeth left, she promised to attend Eliza's next performance. Later that night, Eliza returned to her new apartment, modest but comfortable, with large windows and, most importantly, space for a baby grand piano. She kicked off her formal shoes and sat at the instrument, running her fingers lightly over the keys. A year ago, she had played in secret, stealing moments of joy in an empty mansion. Tonight, she had played for a full concert hall. Both experiences had shaped her, but it was the journey between them that had changed her most profoundly. She began to play softly, not Rachmaninoff or Liszt or Chopin, but something new, something forming in her mind even as her fingers found the notes. Perhaps it would become her next composition, or perhaps it was just for herself, a private celebration of how far she had come. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled against the night sky. Inside, music filled the rooms of her home, no longer a secret, no longer a memory of what might have been, but the living heartbeat of her reclaimed life. As the final notes faded into silence, Eliza felt a sense of completion. The girl who had once played for judges and competitions, the woman who had cleaned houses to survive, the maid who had stunned a room full of wealthy patrons, they were all part of her still, but no single role defined her anymore. She was simply Eliza Morales, pianist and composer, finally playing her own song.